All right, so this one's going to be kind of a long one because we have a lot to get through, so bear with me. So I want you to look at these two cars here. Look at these two cars. Okay, really look at them. Do you think there's a relationship between them besides of how they look? So you think there's anything that's similar between these two things besides their looks? You think? Hopefully you're thinking yes. Okay. They are proportional. They are proportional. Okay, so they are proportional. And if we had to compare something, we would say that the rate would be 14 inches to 20 feet, which can be, or 14 to 20, right? 14 to 20, which can be labeled as a scale, which is when we put in inches to 20 feet. And conversely, then we can find the unit rate of those objects. So we would find the unit rate. And let's say we want the inches to be 1. So we want 1 inch to something. So find the unit rate by dividing 14 by 20. You should get 1 3/4 feet. Okay. We call the smaller car the scale model. This is the scale model of the larger car. You're thinking, when are you going to use this? Really? Unless you're an architecture or an entrepreneur or some type of career like that, you're not really going to use scale models very often. However, it is a good skill to have. Okay. So let's go over a bunch of definitions. So let's look down here. We have a bunch of definitions to get through. First one, what is a scale drawing? It's a drawing of an actual object. So a drawing of an actual object with accurate dimensions that are reduced or enlarged by a scale factor. Okay, so scale drawing is what these cars would be considered. This whole thing here is a scale drawing. So this is a scale drawing. Okay, this whole thing. Whereas a scale model, conversely, is a drawing, or it can be a 3D model of an actual object with accurate dimensions reduced or enlarged by a scale factor. So you may be thinking, isn't that what we just wrote for up top? They're really similar, but the difference is that only the smaller car is the scale model. So only the smaller car is the scale model. Okay, the scale drawing is the big picture of you comparing the two things, whereas a scale model is just a smaller down version. So you would really use that if you're talking about just a building. if you just have a 3D model of a building you want to make. That would be on a scale model. Whereas a scale drawing, you're showing both the larger and the smaller dimensions together. So now we have to talk about a scale. A scale is the ratio of one dimension in a drawing or model to the same dimension of an actual object. And a scale is what we wrote up here. The scale would be that the 14 inches to 20 feet. So this is a scale because we're comparing the smaller to the larger. And it tells us what that is. Now, a scale factor is similar to a scale. However, the difference is that the ratio of corresponding dimensions are in similar units. So that would be taking this really and making sure they're both in inches. So we would say 1 inch is the same as, we want to convert feet to inches. How many inches are in a foot? 12. How many inches are in 3/4 of a foot? So I would think of what's 3/4 of 12. It's going to be 9. So then I add those up. So then it's 1 inch is 21 inches. That's your scale factor. So we took our scale and made it into the same dimensions, the same units, okay? They're both inches instead of inches to feet. So that's really the only difference there. Okay, let's go to the next page. Let's go to the next page. Now we're going to actually start to get some math done. Okay, well, first after we learn how to do the math. All right, so let's talk about calculating the scale factor. Let's talk about calculating the scale factor. Okay, in order to do that, you would write the scale as a fraction. Write the scale as a fraction. Then you would, write it as a fraction that compares the model length, or distance to the actual length. And I'll tell you, there's something that we simply would write on most of our papers that says model over actual. And that'll be really helpful to remember, model over actual. And that's all this is saying. Then you want to change the lengths of distances to the same units. Remember, we said that back over on the first page, that scale factor has the same units. Okay, and then we simplify. But if we're calculating the length or distance of a scale model or drawing, you use the scale factor. We take our scale factor and the given length to set up a proportion. And we set up a proportion where it's our scale that's equal to what we're finding. Okay, so we would set up a proportion to find the missing length. All right, so let's do a couple of examples here. So I want you to read number 1 for me. Pause and read number 1. All right, so I'm going to remind us that it's model over actual. And like we said up there, we set our scale equal to whatever it is. So I have my scale here, which says 1 inch is equal to 35 miles. So that's my first set of my proportion. 1 inch equals 35 miles. 1 inch equals 35 miles. So 35 miles. Then we set that proportion equal to what we have. So we have that on the map, they're 3.25 inches apart. And we want to find the actual. So we want to find our actual distance. So our proportion is going to be over x, because we're finding our actual, and we're given our 3.25 inches. Okay, so then you would solve this by cross multiplying. So I'd have 1 times x, which is just x, equals, and then 35 times 3.25. Do that in your calculator. So 35 times 3.25, and you should get 113.75. But now we need to label it. Is it inches or is it miles? I know that it's miles. That's because we're talking about, again, the actual distance. The actual distance between 2 cities is in inches. It's going to be miles apart. Okay? Let's do one more. So read example 2. Okay, I'm going to start highlighting some important things. I see we have a scale drawing, and it has a scale of 1 inch to 1.6 feet. If the kitchen in the drawing is 10.5 inches, find the actual length. So again, we set up a proportion. Our first half is our scale. So our scale is 1 inch to 1.6 feet. We set it equal to what we're given. We want to find our actual. Remember, it's model over actual. So our actual is our x. And our model is this 10.5 inches. So 10.5 inches. Okay? And again, we solve by cross multiplying. 1 times x is x. And then do 1.6 times 10.5. Do 1.6 times 10.5. You should get 16.8. Now, should it be inches or feet, do you think? Inches or feet? Hopefully you said feet, because inches is our scale drawing measurements, not the actual length of our kitchen. That would be feet. Okay? Now, the next two are finding our scale factor. So, we have a scale model of 2 inches to 5 feet. So, in order to find our scale factor, remember we write it as a ratio, aka we write it as a fraction, 2 inches over 5 feet. And we really want to convert those feet to inches, because we want everything in the same unit. So we want to get everything in the same unit. So, how many inches are in 5 feet. So I know in 1 foot, there's 12 inches. So I do 12 times 5, which will give me 60. Okay, so we know for every 2 inches in the model, there's 60 inches in the actual. But we want to write it like it's a unit rate. We don't want to write it as 2 and 60. We want it really as 1 inch over something. So we want to compare it as 1 inch to something. So it's really, I would divide both of these by 2. So it's 1 inches to 30 inches. Okay. Hopefully that kind of made sense. Just to repeat, we set it up as a fraction. We converted it to inches for everything. And then we simplified. Okay, so we're going to do the same thing over here. So we have our scale of 2 feet to 4 miles. Okay, so I'm going to set that up as 2 feet over 4 miles. We want to convert everything to feet. We want to convert everything to feet. What I will tell you is that 1 mile is equal to 5,280 feet. In case you didn't remember that. It's also in the back of your planner. Okay, that conversion. So what I would do is I would take this and multiply it by 4. So we figure out how many feet are in 4 miles. So we do 4 times 5,280. When you do that, you should get 2 feet over 21,120 feet. Now, in theory, we are done here, but not really. We want it as 1 foot over some foot. So we want to convert this to a unit rate pretty much. So we're going to divide both of these numbers by 2. So when you do 21,120 divided by 2, you should get 10,560. Okay, let's go to the next page. I'm going to let you do a couple on your own here. Okay, I want you to read each problem carefully. Read it. Okay, so I want you to read each problem carefully, round to the nearest hundredth place. So I want you to do 1 and 2 for me right now. 1 and 2. Okay, so number 1, you should have gotten 233.33 inches because you were finding the model. Okay, we needed to find the model given the scale of 3.5 inches to 75 miles, which again is the first half of our proportion, equal to model over actual. You're going to have to memorize this, model over actual. Okay, and then once I did that, you just cross multiplied and solve. Same thing for number 2, so I'm just going to keep on going. And let's look at example 3. So we want to find the scale factor here. Okay, so it gives you the 2 dimensions, so I want you to find the scale factor. All right, so hopefully you notice they're already the same unit. They're both yards. So you didn't have to simplify or convert or anything. So all I had to do was simplify to get pretty much the unit rate. Okay, all I had to do is pretty much find the unit rate. We're going to skip number 4, cross that out. Now your homework is going to be 5 and 6, and that's due on February 19th. Okay, the first one should be pretty straightforward. 5 is pretty straightforward. Number 6 is a little tricky. I'll tell you that model over actual doesn't really work for this one, So you're going to do base over height. Okay, so you're going to want to do your base over your height for that one.